If you watch the developer direct for Grounded 2, one thing is clear. They want to improve upon the original game. So let's take a look at everything new Grounded 2 will be doing. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. So first things first, Grounded 2 will only be available on the Xbox Series X and S generation of consoles, as well as on PC. There was no mention of coming to PlayStation or Nintendo Switch 2, but I think that's likely at some point in the future, given the first game was on there. I know this might disappoint some of you that are playing on the Xbox One generation of consoles, but for the game overall, it's just a good thing to move to the current generation of consoles. That way it won't be held back like the original game was, where they had to cut things and they just couldn't get everything in just due to the memory constraints from the original consoles. Next up, the developer said they're going to be launching with a roadmap. Now, I know the original game, they had a feature board that was available that kind of had things they may or may not have been working on, and I hope this roadmap is a lot more robust than that. For me, it's a really positive sign that they know exactly what they want to plan out and what the updates are going to be in the future, in the short term, medium term, and long term. And having a roadmap will just give all of us an idea of exactly what milestones are going to be looking for, as well as seeing how our feedback is incorporated in the changes to that roadmap over the course of the development. Along the same lines, they said they're going to be doing bigger, less frequent updates. Now, this was something they did towards the latter part of the development of the original Grounded game, where instead of doing monthly updates or like bi-monthly updates, they started doing them every 3-4 months, something like that. So for Grounded 2, you can expect updates to be less frequent, but they're going to have more content in them. The main reason they said for that is they want to have time to be able to digest all the feedback they get from the updates and make sure the updates are, I guess, impactful enough that they actually change the game. So I'm okay with that. I'd rather have bigger, less frequent updates as long as they have a lot of content coming with them. They did say one thing, and along the same line, another thing they said was there's going to be way more content at launch. So one of the issues I personally had, and I know others had, and if you look at the numbers, I kind of think it speaks for itself. The original Grounded had almost no content at launch. It was more like a sandbox. There was a little bit of storyline, but essentially you could basically do everything in the game in probably about 30 minutes to an hour if you just speed ran the quests. So it sounds like this time they're going to have way more content at launch. They specifically mentioned that they know that people blow through the story content really quickly. So it sounds like they're going to start with a bigger baseline of content. So it'll keep you playing longer. And then with those bigger, less frequent updates, those will have a lot more content too. So you're not able to just blow through all the content in like a day or two. And having more content makes sense because the map is going to be roughly 3 times bigger than the original game. They did say the spawn area, the starting area of Grounded 2 is actually about the same size as the original map in the first game. So if you can think about how big the map is in the first game, and I know by some comparisons to some games it's not that big, but it's pretty big considering the size of your character, and then you triple that, that's going to be a huge map, which will allow them to explore lots of different things like different biomes, different creatures, different layouts. So I think overall it'll just be a much bigger experience, which makes sense, and hopefully have a bigger story, more content, and a lot more stuff to do. Of course, they did mention there's going to be other biomes, and they did show some of them off. One of the big ones was going to be the cold biome. They showed the tipped over ice cream cart that had some scorpions inside of it, and it looked like it had ice cream. It had a bunch of ice cream. It looked like the characters were also farming maybe like chocolate chips or something that were from the ice cream. Now, one thing that was not mentioned in the developer direct or in the trailer, but was on the Steam page and the news post that they put up was they're going to have a multi-tool. So the multi-tool is going to be a combination of the axe, hammer, shovel, and wrench. So what that means is less inventory space is going to be taken up by the tools that you need just to kind of play the game. So that's pretty cool. They didn't actually show it. I didn't see any pictures of it, but I'm not sure if it's going to take up an inventory space or if you're just going to have it. If it only takes up one inventory space, I'm all for that. The inventory management obviously is one of the challenges of survival games. So cleaning it up by having 4 tools in one is just going to be an amazing update to Grounded 2. One thing that I pushed for and kind of suggested several times during Grounded's development was to allow us to have passive mutations, and that is something that you're going to have in Grounded 2. So you'll unlock mutations just like in the first game, but some of them will be passive, which means that once you unlock them, they're active at all times. And from what it looked like, it might have been the ones that were weapon related, although that's not confirmed, but that would be what makes the most sense. If you unlock a skill by, I don't know, like using a bow and killing a bunch of bugs with the bow, not having to have that toggled on and off kind of didn't make sense, but being able to, like, once you've unlocked it, it's like a skill, like in life. If you once you learn how to ride a bike, you pretty much know how to ride a bike. If you do a bunch of push-ups, you're going to be stronger. If you run a lot, you're going to have more stamina. So once you unlock those things, having them passive is going to allow for much different build diversity, which was another thing they touched upon. It seems like they're going to be going down the road of ARPG, where you can actually do real builds. I know you could make some builds in the first game, especially once NG Plus was added and they had all the trinkets that had different perks on them. But now you're gonna actually be able to have like straight up builds. They showed an assassin build. They showed, I think they said you could have a tank build. There was a wizard build. There was a ranged build with the bow, and you'll be able to spec into those by using the different mutations and different armors and weapon sets. So I'm definitely looking forward to finding the strongest build that can just completely break the game. I will say that Grounded the original game did have pretty decent combat, especially compared to most survival games. And one thing they're doing is they're improving upon that. So they're adding a dash ability, which means you'll be able to dash in and out of combat. But they also said that the creatures will be able to dash in and out of combat, or some of them will. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. They basically said it's going to be like rock, paper, scissors. So you can do normal attacks, heavy attacks, and you can block. But then there's also the dash ability. And it's just, I think it's going to make for just better combat overall. One thing they did show off was the fact that you can actually dual wield weapons in Grounded too. So it was specific to the daggers that they showed. So they showed it looked like, I think they call them Wolfbane daggers. So I think they were wolf spider daggers. So being able to dual wield weapons, pretty cool idea. Should make for some more interesting builds. And then along the same lines was when they hovered over the assassin mutation, which generally is associated with daggers, it did say it works with daggers and sickles. So there's going to be sickles as a new weapon type in Grounded. So we're going to have at least one new weapon type. I'm sure there'll probably end up being at least a few others, but the one was definitely confirmed is going to be sickles, and it sounds like they're going to be a dual wielding weapon as well. Then another thing they added specific to combat is going to be visual effects for perfect blocks and attacks. Of course, in the first game, there was you would know if you got a perfect block, but now it's going to be very obvious. Like there's just a very obvious visualization on the screen. And the same thing with attacks. Holding down the bow it'll have like little stars or something around it when you shoot it. Same thing with the and then when I guess when doing a heavy attack, it does the same thing. So it's definitely it'll be good for those that are more in tune with visualizations rather than actually hearing or So I think overall it's just going to make for a cleaner experience. They also showed that orb weavers can use webs as a shield. So that was part of the rock, paper, scissors thing. They didn't show off any of the other creatures' abilities doing anything like that, but specifically the orb weaver was holding up a web as a shield, and it had to be I think it was a heavy attack, broke it, and then the combat continued. But that's definitely going to make for some cool, like the first time you experience that's going to be really interesting. Walk up to an orb weaver, start attacking all of a sudden, and just throws up a web shield. And then if the other creatures do that, definitely going to make combat a little more interesting. And then the orb weavers also, obviously you can make them, you can ride on them. And I'm not sure if they do it themselves or if it's only when you're using them as mounts, but they did show that orb weavers can make bridges out of webs. So having them be able to go between like two areas that they normally wouldn't be able to get across was really cool. And then they also showed that red soldier ants can carry grass planks and weed stems. So obviously you had pets in the first game, and you could use their inventory to store items. But now you can have the red soldier ants carry grass planks and weed stems for you. And then of course the orb weavers and red soldier ants can be mounts. So instead of pets. So pets in the first game were pretty cool just for the fact that they could give you extra inventory slots. And then most of them gave you a buff that could be useful. But now having the mounts as instead of pets, where they can where the orb weavers can help you get places you normally wouldn't be able to get to. The red soldier ants are able to give you the ability to carry extra weed stems and grass planks, and you can use them to fight in combat. So you can ride them, or they'll actually fight alongside you. That's just, like I said, that's going to make the experience. It's going to be a completely new experience in terms of combat and how the combat plays out in Grounded 2. And then last but not least was one thing they mentioned was Grounded had zip lines, and they do plan on having zip lines at some point in Grounded 2. But they said at launch for early access, there's not going to be any zip lines. The reason they said that they didn't want to put zip lines in is they want to see how the mounts, or as they're calling them, buggies, so how the orb weaver and red soldier ant buggies, how they affect movement in the game, and before they put zip lines in. So they're kind of working their way, they're going to work backwards towards it. Instead of just giving you zip lines right from the start, they're going to put them in at some point in the future, if they put them in. Maybe they find out that the mounts or the buggies that we get are actually all we really need. If we get a flying one, that would probably just completely trivialize zip lines. So there will be no zip lines at the start, but there's going to be other ways of getting around. So those are the things that I found so far that Grounded 2 will be different than the original game that I think will all be improvements. Let me know which one you're most excited to try out in the comments down below. Once again, if you find this content interesting or if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.